Hello. So, as some of you may or may not know, I recently switched jobs. So, I've been in defensive cyber security now for about 8 years. Although I feel like I've been saying that for like a few years, so maybe it's 10 now. I don't know. I've been in defensive security for a while, and I've recently now switched to offensive security, specifically Purple Team. For anyone who doesn't know, there's three rough teams within cybersecurity. You've got Blue Team, which is the defensive side of cyber, which is everything from, arguably everything from, compliance, risk management, through to analysts and engineering who actually look for attacks happening in the network. Then you have the offensive side of security, which is like pen testers, red teamers, and purple teamers. Pen testing is quite it's the broad vulnerability analysis type of thing, where you're just doing mass scans against a network looking to find any and all vulnerabilities you can, pack these up into a report with the relevant ones and send it off. Red teaming is more narrow in what it's trying to do. So they're typically they um, take an APT group, a hacking group, and mimic them. So they pick a group that's likely to target the company that they're working for, or the tactics or techniques or anything like that might be used against the company, and then they mimic them and try and attack the company using those methods, obviously all with approval. And the idea there is that the blue team, the inside people, don't know that this is happening. They don't know that there's a red team engagement going on. So they have to treat it like an actual live exercise. As far as they're aware, it is an actual attack on the company. So it's a good way of testing not just the detections of any tools and systems I have in place, but also the reactions of the blue team, the insiders who are looking for these attacks. The purple team is, as you can imagine, somewhere in between. It's specified, or it's specifically more geared towards looking at detections. And so same thing, take a known attack method, and they try and do it in the network, but they're a lot more transparent about what they're doing. So it's working with the blue team, working with the analysts to sort of say, hey, okay, I'm doing some testing on X machine. I just did X, Y, Z. What did you see? What did you not see? And it can be very beneficial to have that communication, because the red team has the same reputation with the blue team as cybersecurity as a whole usually has with the other companies. The relationship can be a bit tense. So having a purple team sort of bridge that gap is super helpful. And I'm now a purple teamer, and so I'm doing a lot more offensive security stuff. I am still learning, but I wanted to do some videos and stuff on the stuff that I'm learning, because I take on information a lot better when I'm getting ready to teach other people. So I'm a lecturer with another or with a university, and the amount that I've learned from getting ready to teach basically CompTIA Security Plus syllabuses. The amount I've learned from getting ready for that is amazing. So I try to use that as a way to learn myself. So I'm going to be trying to do lots of videos as I'm learning cool things, as much as I can share. There may be some stuff that's, say, sensitive and company specific, in which case I can't do a video on that. But anything sort of generic principles I'll be doing. I'm going to a course soon, a SANS Red Team course here in Amsterdam in a week's time. So I'll hopefully have lots of stuff to bring back from that as well as I'm getting ready for the exam. And what I wanted to look at specifically today is EDR evasion, or antivirus evasion. So they are different things. AV, EDR, and XDR are different security tools. AV is probably what most of you have heard of, antivirus software. It looks for hashes or fingerprints of files and systems, although maybe not so much anymore, but I'll show you that something I came across when I was testing. But it basically looks for known malicious files, known malicious things, and blocks them wherever possible. And EDR sort of takes a step back and looks more at not just the specific file that's being run, but more what it's doing and what other things it's trying to do. And if the patterns look like it could be malicious, then it can report it back or block it or whatever. EDR and XDR are sort of more enterprise type grade. There is open source ones. I'm going to show you. I've got an XDR running here, so I'll show you that a little bit later on. So they are slightly more enterprise grade, so there's a lot of like alerting and stuff rather than necessarily outright blocking, because typically, blocking just outright, especially in an enterprise in a company, can be quite destructive to the company itself, and you don't want your own security tools to be wrecking, costing you money more than an actual attack would. So typically there's a lot more reporting side of things than just outright blocking. Certain things obviously do just get blocked. But yeah, EDR takes that step back and sort of looks more at what the application, what the process is doing. And then XDR takes it another step further back, and looks at like the network level as well. So not only what's the processes going on the device, what things is it doing on the computer, but what other computers is it talking to? Is there like a weird calculator process has been started up, and now all of a sudden that's talking out to some external server? Well, that's weird. Okay, and an antivirus wouldn't pick that up necessarily, but an XDR might. So lots of different stuff there, and lots of different ways to evade them, and try and get around them. So what I'm working with at the minute is Defender, so Microsoft Defender. This is the AV version, so it's the one that's just comes with all Windows devices. There's nothing too fancy here. Getting around AV can be quite easy, and it can also be quite difficult depending on what it is you're doing. So I'm going to show you some stuff here. I have a piece of code that you're seeing here. This is running some shell code, so some binary, which is this. Obviously this is in hex format, but it's running some shell code, or it's going to try and run some shell code, which is a reverse VPN, or a reverse shell, which is basically a connection going out from the victim machine out to the attacker's server, in which case I have one here. If I bring this over. So this is all happening locally on my machine. I've got different VMs set up, but they're all here. I don't have anything off the network just at the minute. I'm still setting up my lab. But this is a Ubuntu machine using Windows Subsystem for Linux. And so on this, I have a little listener that will start up, and that's going to be our attack box. This is the box that we want to get a connection out to. So this shellcode is meant to connect out to that, is meant to do a reverse connection. This shellcode is generic, it's not how we're going to connect. I'll show you that in a second. But what this is trying to do is avoid EDR by putting something in memory. So whenever a lot of antivirus systems and things like that connect, run to scan things, they're typically looking on the disk, okay, on the hard drive itself, or the SSD, or whatever it may be. So an evasion technique can be to try and run it in memory in the RAM instead, so that it's not touching the disk, and that's what this shellcode is attempting to do. Something else I should say. Again, I am new to offensive security, more or less. I've done CTFs, I do hack the boxes, I learn all that good stuff, but doing it from an enterprise perspective and actually doing it as my day job is new to me. So if I do say anything that's wrong, or you're like, actually that's not quite how that works, please comment below, let me know, and wherever possible, put sources as well, because it's the internet. Anyone can go into the comments and say, no, you're wrong because I said so. It's not helpful. So if you're watching these videos to learn along with me, make sure to check the comments in case there's anything that I've misspoke or not said, explained correctly, so people can update it. And again, if you notice anything, put it in the comments. I'm just realizing that as I'm talking about shellcodes, there may be something I say wrong here, which is why I'm saying that now. So yeah, so the idea being is to put it into RAM, into memory, so that it can be avoided by anything that's checking for the disk. But the reason that I've got this here is not to do EDR evasion. This is actually our malware file. Because I pulled this off the internet, I have not changed anything in this file, and it actually gets flagged by AV. So I've got autosave on, so if I make any change in this file, it will save it. So you should see it appear on the left hand side here, and then we should see AV pop up. Oh, my head's in the way, hold on. Ooh. It popped up down there. Let me move myself up here. So we can see that Defender popped up to say that it found something, and so if I bring over here we can see that we found a threat, and if I do remove, we'll just remove that. It will remove it automatically itself after a little bit. We can see that it flags it. Okay, so it obviously knows that this file is not doing anything good, which is correct. So what could we do to get around this? So as I said, most AV works on fingerprints and things like that. So what we could try and do is change up the file. Now, I've already done that to a small degree here. So if I go to malcode, you can see I've got lots of weird stuff in here. We'll go through this code in a second, but then I've also got the original code minus the shell. I just took it out just for space saving, and it's commented out. Okay, so this code doesn't actually do anything that this code does, but it has some of the same components in it. And if I try and save this one, again, pops up and sees it. So even though I've changed this file quite drastically and even removed effectively, or well, commented out the functions that are doing the malicious thing, AV's still picking it up. So how's it doing that? Well, there's a couple of ways that it could be doing it. One, it's not using hash fingerprinting, not a standard hash anyway, because for anyone who doesn't know, a normal hash is like a fingerprint of a file. If you change anything in here, like even just putting a space, the hash will completely change. It won't even be slightly similar. It will just be completely different. But what AV systems use now is a thing called fuzzy hashing or SS deep hashing. And what that does is it creates a hash that is specifically meant to not change as much and to be comparable. So if we take the file and just change it slightly, we can then do a comparison with the hashes of hash of the malicious file, hash of the file that we think might be malicious, and then do a comparison and check and see what is the similarity between these two files. If they're very similar, then it can, over a certain threshold, it raises an alert. Another thing it could be doing, I'm not so sure that it is, but another thing it should be doing is actually a bit of static code analysis. I highly doubt Defender's doing this, but it could be actually looking at the code itself and actually reading the code and going, well, this, okay, it's commented out, but this is suspicious, so I don't like it and I'm going to remove it. It could be doing that, I don't think so. I would say it's most likely going to be doing some form of fuzzy hashing, but it may not. And so what I've got here is fuzzy. This is just some Python code to do a fuzzy hash of these two files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Defender to allow me to save these files, and then I am going to do a fuzzy hash of them, and we'll see how similar they are. I'm going to allow that on the device. See about pop-ups there. Space that one saves. Oh yeah, there we go, both of them ran. And so actually it's something that's worth pointing out. So hopefully you can see here the threat detected is exploit Python Leviathan A, this. So that's what's picking up. It's not actually calling it by the name that the file is. Okay, and I think that's a key thing to keep in mind when we're thinking of how this is blocking this. And the reason I'm focusing on how this is blocking it is because that, in my mind, is the best way to understand how to get around it. Is, okay, how is this picking up if it's malicious or not? And if we understand that, then we can understand how to get around it and abuse it. Okay, and that's so from my years in Blue Team on the offensive side, I understand how the security tools work, which is what makes me useful, I think, as an offensive security, because I know how these things can be broken because I know how they work. So what I'm going to do is go into fuzzy. This should pick up the correct code, and if I run this, oh, error, hold on, let me debug this. Okay, so I hadn't actually told it to read the file and to get the contents as a string. So if we run this now, so again, this is comparing the original malicious code, malcode.org and malcode, and if I run this, we can actually see that it's 0. So as far as the fuzzy hash that I'm using, it says that these files are completely different, which is understandable given the amount that I have changed in here. That, yeah, it's fair that this doesn't see it as the same file. Now, does that mean that Defender is using or isn't using fuzzy hashing? Not necessarily. Okay, what it could mean is that just the hashing function that I have operates differently and sees things differently. Or, and what I think is possibly the case, is that it is actually reading into the file and looking at it and seeing the content of it and going, hold on, this bit looks malicious. Because it's seeing, again, it's not necessarily doing something like static code analysis to a degree. I mean, you could argue that it maybe is, but it's seeing into the file and seeing those, seeing these calls that it sees as malicious. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to take these files and I'm going to put them into VirusTotal. VirusTotal has a really good hashing function and recognizes whether anything is malicious. I'm going to put it into that and see what it comes back with. Okay, so I've got the file ready, so I'm going to put up the original one first and upload that into VirusTotal. We will see what it comes back with. So yeah, it's actually picking up the shellcode in the original, which is nice. So that's actually the block, that shellcode that's in there. That's what's being picked up here. Here we're seeing Python exploit 11. That's the same as what we've seen in AV, in Defender. So yeah, these are picking up quite a bit. A lot of them are picking up on the reverse shell. Some of them are picking up on this Python 11 or Levion. So we can see some of the details in here, and again we've got that ssdeep hash that I talked about. So this is the comparison hash. ssdeep and ppdeep, the one that I was using Python, is just a Python wrapper for ssdeep. So we can see the different hashes here and a little bit of information about it. There's not much there. Again, most of the information comes from here, and they're picking up that shell more than anything. Python inject, that's possibly more in line with what we're doing. The shell code is obviously the reverse shell is the shell code that's in there. So let's now take the other file and see what gets picked up. So now this is finished. You see we've got one less detection, so it has evaded one form of AV by changing it. But an interesting thing here, this is a new feature in VirusTotal that I did not know they had. Crowdsourced AI, so it tries to give it tries to give a little bit of context as to what the code is doing, and you see most of this is my actual shell code, so the code that I'm using to create the reverse shell. But the big thing here in comparison to what we were using is the C types library. So down here you can see there's comment out code creating a bind shell using C types library. If we go into the other one, you can see that this is what this is talking about, is that it's using C types library to allocate virtual address space and create a thread that executes the shellcode within the thread. So to me it looks like what these AVs are picking up on is the use of that the C code, C shell, what am I talking about? What is it called? C types, the C types library. It seems to be that and the putting it into an allocation of memory. That seems to be what it's picking up on and what it's then flagging on. So to me it makes more sense now that it is actually reading the file. Now, what could we do about that? There's a couple of things. One, we could compile it. Okay, if we compile the code, it then obfuscates it in a way that then it's more difficult to read, and that's when we have to start relying on fingerprints and hashes. So we'll try that. And another thing we could do if we really want to run Python, because in some cases, we can't run an exe. If we're on a system, there might be rules or systems in place that allow unauthorized exes to run. And so in which case running it as like a bash script or Python, which is installed almost everywhere these days, or as uncompiled code can be useful to try and get things running, which is what's happening in that other code. So if I pull this back up, this is the whole reason that we're doing this, is because, you know, we want to be able to execute this with Python and not run an exe that could be detected. You know, we want to run it as Python and put it into memory so that we're not doing anything suspicious that way. Obviously this is being caught, but that's the idea behind it. But let's say we could run exes. What we could do then is just compile this code and see if it then also gets snagged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compile this Python code. So we still have Defender told to ignore these files. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into an exe and then tell Defender not to ignore the files anymore and see what gets blown away and see what doesn't. So I'm going to use a tool called Pt1. My paths are a little messed up, which is why I need to use this command prompt. So do Pt1, and we want to do, we'll do both of them, will we? We'll do both of them. So we'll do malcode.py. Let that run. Okay, so we now have the exes. So if I go here on the left, we can see we've got malcode and malcode.exe. What I'm going to do now, before I turn Defender back on and tell it to look at it, we're going to test these exes actually work at all. So if I do an ls here and go into dist, and we will do malcode, and where am I? If I go over here, I've got my listener now set up. So this is now running. And if I then do malcode, run that. Oh, I know why. I need to pass it 127.0.0.1. And that worked. So here, look, we've now got a connection and we're actually in the directory that this is running from. So if I do an ls, or sorry, not an ls, I'm in a command prompt, a dir, we're in that directory. And if I do a control C to break out of it, we'll see, there we go. We're now back into the Ubuntu WSL instance. So the code still works as an exe. Now let's turn on Defender again. So if I go over here and go to virus protection and go to allowed threats, go in here and we will say don't allow. Now we should see a lot of stuff getting blown away. I hope. We should see stuff getting blown away. Oh, this is an interesting thing. Hold on, if I do this. Yeah, so this is an interesting thing as well with some AVs and stuff, is that they only pay attention to files when they change. So in some cases, particularly with processes, I believe, and this is where it may correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. Whenever a process is spawned, the AV or the EDR pays attention to it quite thoroughly. So it looks at it and says, okay, you've just started, what are you doing? And it only does this for a set period of time, and then it stops looking at it as much. And so a common technique to get around that is to just wait. Okay, so for some EDRs, if you spawn a process, if you spawn a system and you just wait for a bit before doing anything, doing any of your reverse connections, anything like that, sometimes the EDR will not pay as much attention to after a set period. And they have to do this. This isn't necessarily a flaw. Well, there's a flaw in EDRs, but it's an expected flaw. The reason being is that there are so many processes, so many things running on systems and servers and all of that they can't watch all of them as thoroughly as it might like, because that takes up resources. Okay, so if you think that, you know, the EDR is then monitoring every single process, watching very, very carefully all of the connections it's making, all of the things it's doing, it'll be very, very resource intensive, and it would slow the machine way, way down. More processes, more complicated they are, the more effort will be needed. So that's why they do this sort of let's take a look at you first. And then of course they don't ignore it completely. If it does do something that's really, really obviously malicious, it then steps back in. But at least as a quick way of being like, to avoid the initial scrutiny, you can wait. And the same thing's happened here. The file was already on the system. Whenever we said to the defender, okay, now you can, because the defender was only looking for that specific threat. It wasn't looking at the specific file necessarily. It was just saying, I found this threat. It just happened to be in that file. Because the file was already there, defender doesn't go through and check until it does another scan, which some of you may know you can go in and hit scan now. It does do them periodically as well. Until that scan comes around, this code here, this file, is just going to sit there quite happily. Now if we tried to run it, I'm pretty sure it would pick up. So in fact, let's do that. If I hit run, you can see it has been picked up because the file then changed, then tried to do something. So there are times when it comes in, but just sitting there, it didn't get picked up at all. Now let's try the exe. So we're going to try the exe again. So let me get my reverse shell up. So we've got this sitting here. It's now waiting. And go into dist. Okay, we've got our exe. Exe still there. Again, it wouldn't have got picked up until we try and run it. So let's do that. And let's see if it gets picked up. Oh, what did that not like? Oh, I'm in the wrong place. So let's run it from here. Hasn't blown it away right away. And look at that, we're in. There. Okay, so from that we can assume that what Defender was doing was it was actually looking into the file, seeing those calls, seeing that C type, and determining that was malicious. But whenever we compiled it into something that's more difficult to read, it's then not being picked up by Defender. And let's now take it and throw it into VirusTotal and see whether any of the other AVs pick it up as well. Okay, so we've got this ready, and I'm going to open it and upload. And let's see what comes back. Okay, so it's finished scanning, and we've now only got 7 detections. So certainly not perfect. There are AVs out there that have picked up that this is still a malicious package, but much fewer, 10 less than what we were getting on the other one. We also noticed that the code analysis isn't there because again it's a compiled file. It hasn't got code that can be easily analyzed in that way. If we go into the details, again we've just got SSD hashes, things like that. Some compiler products, again nothing too interesting. But obviously the key thing is that it has been picked up 7 times. Now we can do more, but I think I'm going to leave it there for this one. And let me just, one thing I do want to show very briefly is Wazoo. And this is the XDR that I have running on this system, and you'll notice that it has picked up nothing. Okay, from everything that we were doing from the last hour, it hasn't picked anything up. Now, this isn't necessarily a issue with Wazoo being rubbish. I haven't configured this much yet. This is like straight out of the box. But I would have hoped that it would have at least picked up the fact that Defender was picking things up. But so I'll need to check whether it's getting the logs correctly and things like that, because it should be in here that it's picking these things up. But at the minute I actually didn't see much, which is very interesting. So as I said, there is more that we can do here to then try and obfuscate that exe file further, and we're going to do that in another video. If anyone has any ideas or tips or things that you want to try, another thing we could do that I'd actually planned to do and just didn't get around to it yet is use PyArmor. which is a way of like obfuscating the code itself. So we're going to try that in the next. We'll try a couple more ways of trying to run the exe through some software to make it a bit more sneaky, and then also trying to obfuscate the Python code. One of the downsides that we have with obfuscating the Python code is that it tends to break quite easily and takes a fair amount of debugging, which is then very difficult when the Python code is garbled in such a way that it's very difficult to read both for a person and an AV software. But if I got anything slightly wrong in this, let me know. If anything that you think would be good value to add to it, put it in the comments below. Let me know. And again, sources wherever possible. If you have any good toolkits or anything like that you want to share, again, put it below. And yeah, hopefully we'll keep doing these, and you'll see some more stuff.